I mean, it's early on. I know we don't want to start talking about titles right now.
Yeah.
But
Talk about it.
Ta'Niya Latson averaging 25 points per game. The Gamecocks are already such a rounded team. And then it's like you just grab the biggest superstar you can find and just throw it on that team. They're going to be scary. They're going to be scary. They're going to be real scary next year.
Welcome into another edition of South Carolina Sideline, everybody. I'm Matt Dowell alongside Jared Parker. We are making our studio debut for our new podcast. So whether you're watching us on Watch Fox, YouTube, listening to us wherever you get your Apple podcast, we are excited to do our podcast for the first time in our new studios. And make sure you guys like, subscribe, follow, comment, all the good stuff wherever you do listen to your podcast. We debuted this on the road during the NCAA Tournament. Now we're happy to be back in Columbia after a few weeks of traveling with the South Carolina women's basketball team. And Jared, it's been a very, very fun last month, very busy last month. We're very tired, and our studio debut, our whole show today, is going to be dedicated to the South Carolina women's basketball team as we kind of wrap up this season, another successful season for the South Carolina Gamecocks, of course, who fell in the national championship to UConn. Not the ending they wanted, Jared, but certainly another great season, more SEC championships, another national championship appearance for you. This was your first NCAA tournament covering the Gamecocks. Yep. So how was it for you? What's your big takeaway from your rookie season?
Well, I mean, the rookie year was unlike anything I expected. It's really my first time following a program that has so much national attention, and being here in person to see the operation and see what it was like was truly a learning experience. But it was everything that you expect it to be. It was everything that you could ask for. I think my biggest takeaway was honestly seeing how much the fans are engaged with this team. I loved watching that. That was incredible to see game in, game out, the fans just constantly showing up. I remember my first game initially, I think they were playing USF. I figured, I'm used to these non-conference games not being such a huge production, but you told me, expect the fans to be there, and I was shocked that there were so many Gamecock fans at a pretty much almost meaningless game against USF. So that was incredible. But this season, it's been amazing. Like, words can't describe how awesome this experience has been.
And I know for everyone, it's natty or bust with this program at this point. When you won 3 for any program, that's the expectation. But to follow up an undefeated season by getting back to the national championship, it's so hard. It is so hard, and I don't think people really kind of soak in how hard it is. So I know that people are disappointed, but that that they didn't win the whole thing, but they have so much to be proud of for another great season. It's so hard to get back there every single year, and so what this team did is very, very impressive. But Jared, let's break down the game. Let's talk about the national championship game against UConn. I don't think the result was surprising. I mean, UConn was on a mission the whole season long, but I did not see it being a beatdown once again. I mean, UConn really blew out South Carolina both times they played this season. Just a bad matchup for the Gamecocks. I'm also one, I don't think every game needs this, in-depth discourse about, what does this mean? I think when you get to a national championship game, someone's going to win, someone's going to lose. UConn was a team of destiny this season. They peaked at the right time, which I think is huge in March. For me, South Carolina peaked at the SEC tournament, and they never could really find that form again back in this tournament. They did an incredible job of fighting and battling to get back to the championship game. But when you just kind of look at how they both looked and were playing going into the title game, the result was not surprising, but I was surprised that it wasn't close because it was 25-22 in the second quarter. I was like, all right, we got a game. And then UConn just ran away with it. So what was your big takeaway from the game?
Honestly, just how well UConn matches up, not just with South Carolina, but with every team that they've played against. They have a really strong starting 5, but among their strengths, they're so versatile. We've seen Paige Becker is the star. I mean, we've seen her drop 40 points. She honestly, starting that game, didn't start out great. She was missing a lot of shots, but she was still facilitating the offense. And that's where you see their versatility is their strength. She can do those things like go rebound, facilitate the offense, and have an impact while she's not scoring. AZ Fudd, a really strong defender herself, but shot making is her biggest strength. And she made shots in the first time the Gamecocks and UConn met up, and she made shots in the national championship game. Sarah Strong, another one who is super versatile. She can hit the three. She can dominate inside the paint. It's impossible to keep her off the boards.
Yeah.
And I don't think she had an off game all tournament.
No.
So when you mentioned UConn peaking at the right time, they did have, I thought their Tennessee loss earlier in the season wasn't such a great loss, but ultimately it didn't matter because they look like the best team in the nation for the last month, and they got the result that warranted that.
Yeah, for sure. And UConn, they again just playing so well. The big three that they had, which is unbelievable. And AZ Fudd is really the one. When you look at both games that they played against South Carolina this season, she's the one South Carolina had so much trouble stopping. I mean, she dropped, I think, 28 in the February game, and then dropped a lot in the championship game as well. And she was the most outstanding player. So UConn, again, sometimes it's just meant to be, and the stars align for you. Last year it was South Carolina who the stars aligned for. This year it was UConn's story. But let's just keep it real. When everyone loves to talk about oh, what does this mean for next year? They have all these questions, blah blah blah. UConn and South Carolina are both going to be really good next year too.
Yeah.
And they're both going to be contenders, and they'll both probably be in Phoenix next year. But when you look at the offense for South Carolina, that was obviously the big struggle this season. And I think when you look at one of the reasons why they struggled, for me, it was just the three-point shooting. I know everyone talks about the layups, and the missed layups were a huge part of why, they struggled against UConn. But the three-point shooting really wasn't great all postseason long. At the SEC tournament, even though they won by, those games convincingly, they still didn't shoot the three that well. They didn't shoot the three very well, and really not a lot at the NCAA tournament. Pow's percentage, we were talking before the show, it's down 10% from last season. Tessa really wasn't shooting as many as normal. It felt like just the attempts in themselves were down, and I really think that made it hard because even Dawn after the game said, the goal was to try and beat UConn with twos. Once UConn got hot from the three, it's hard to stop them. And South Carolina didn't have anything to counter that. And so for me, it's the three-point shooting that I think really was the difference in this matchup.
I agree. If you look at, like you said, South Carolina from last year, look at Pow.
Yeah.
Her three-point percentage is down 10%. Now, she did shoot 46% from three last year, so there is some context. She's still a very good shooter, and 46% from three is ridiculous.
Yeah, it is.
So you can kind of see why that team won a national championship. But a drop off of 10% from three, no matter who it is, it's going to be noticed. And it was noticed in the tournament. Like you said, with Tessa getting the tournament Tessa moniker last year, we didn't really see a tournament Tessa through 6 games. It felt like we were waiting on that game, waiting on Tessa to start taking those shots. And we just never saw her really get into the groove, start being comfortable with taking those shots. And this is a team that they don't have a lot of knockdown shooters from three. Obviously, you have Bree, you have Mylasia, you have Raven who can all hit the three. But when you look at UConn, not only did they have their big three, but when you talk about Chen, you talk about Ashlyn Shade, they can go deep into the lineup. Shade hit a big three, actually, at the towards the end of the half. So they had a bunch of shooters where if their big three aren't the ones knocking down the three, they have other people who can spread the floor and make their offense dangerous from multiple levels of the floor.
Yeah, so that's kind of I don't want to say the negative side of the game, but that was really just where everything struggled with. But let's talk about the positives, because South Carolina did not play their best basketball in this tournament. I think most people would agree with that. However, the mental strength they showed to get through the Sweet 16, to get through even the second round, to get through the Elite Eight, to beat Texas for a third time, it's hard to play a team 4 times in one season. So I really do think, even though the basketball wasn't the highest quality from South Carolina in this NCAA tournament, I do think the mental strength that they showed and the fight and the battle is really something to be commended. And also, Ashlyn Watkins, losing her was a big deal. They lost a huge presence in the post back in January. The fact that they were still able to get together and find a way to battle and get back to the national championship by losing that big piece, I think they need to be proud of that, and they need to be proud of the way they competed and that they fought towards the end of the season. I also think you could argue this is Dawn Staley's best coaching job she's ever done. When you didn't have a dominant big, you didn't have like a dominant guard, they didn't have a dominant player, tons of depth. But I think that what she was able to do with this team and get them back to that position, I think you could argue it's her best coaching job ever.
I think what shows that is, it's funny you mentioned how there's chatter about, oh, what does this game mean? What does it mean? A 34-win team making the championship and losing isn't really a big deal, but it kind of shows the expectation that Dawn Staley has created at South Carolina. The fact that you make it all the way to the championship game and people are panicking about a loss. Someone has to win. But as far as the coaching job, like you said, in all of their past years where they've won, you have all the South Carolina greats, Asia Wilson, Aaliyah Boston, Camila Cardoso. You didn't really have that presence, and that's no knock on the team. It was an incredibly talented team this year, but it was a bit of a different look from the years that they have won. So as far as a coaching job, I think it's incredible they made it that far. They did not play their best basketball in the earlier rounds of the tournament, and especially when you compare them to teams like UCLA and UConn, who really hardly had any struggle through the first 5 games of the tournament. South Carolina had a lot of close games and a lot of mental strains, I imagine, through those close games. So the fact that they even made it that far is an accomplishment in itself, because there were some times where we were watching and we were like, is this going to hang on? And they continued to hang on through the tournament. So it takes a tremendous amount of mental strength, I know, to travel every weekend and make it through the tournament and make it to the final.
Yeah, and before we take a break here on South Carolina sideline, got to give a shout out to Joyce Edwards, because she did make the all-tournament team, the only South Carolina player to make the all-tournament team. Freshman season, to be named to that. She had a great freshman season, and I think, us and everyone at home is so happy that she ended her season on a huge positive, because she admitted that she was in a slump during the tournament, didn't play her best basketball. So she did play well in the Final Four. She played well in the championship game despite that foul trouble. But, shout out to Joyce Edwards, because it was a great freshman season, and to make the all-tournament team is a huge accomplishment. So that's kind of our breakdown of the Natty against UConn, and congrats to the Huskies. Got to say, too, Paige Beckers, everyone at UConn was so nice to talk to. They were great kids.
Absolutely.
And also same to South Carolina, of course, who, we know very well. But everyone just... the final was full of a bunch of great players, a bunch of great kids, and so that made our weekend. Yeah, great fans, and it made the whole weekend very, very enjoyable. It was just true sportsmanship between both programs, and that was really, really great to see. But we talked about, the shooting struggles in the NCAA tournament for South Carolina. Think that's going to change next season. We're going to take a timeout here on our on South Carolina sideline, and we'll talk some big news for the Gamecocks when we come back. Welcome back to South Carolina Sideline, everybody. South Carolina getting some big, big news. Couple big headlines in the span of like 10 minutes this week. And that is the first, let's talk about, the returner. And that is Raven Johnson is going to come back for another season with South Carolina. She calls herself Big Bird because she's the leader of getting all the birdies into the nest for South Carolina. So, Jared, your initial reaction of Raven coming back for another year to be a leader for the South Carolina team?
I mean, she definitely kept us on edge. She had a couple of hours to declare for the WNBA draft or not. So she definitely kept us waiting. So I found it funny how suspenseful she kept us, but I think this is huge for them. They want to go back and win another national championship. She has done that multiple times before. She's a leader on the court. She brings back elite ball handling skills, elite offensive facilitating skills. She's a floor general.
Yeah.
That's the best way to describe it for her. And I think her coming back, it kind of is the signal like, hey, let's go do this thing. Let's go get to the top one more time.
Yeah, Raven Johnson. And I think she will have another year to really round out her game. Of course, she does so many of the little things well. Raven just is so good, rebounding, steals, just really commanding the floor and commanding the offense. I think shooting is probably the one thing she's going to want to work on as she looks ahead to the WNBA. But even Diana Taurasi on their broadcast during the national championship said Raven Johnson has a spot in the WNBA. She has a place. And if the GOAT is saying that, I mean, come on now. Like, who is everyone to say Raven can't be in the league. But anyway, Raven is going to come back for another year, use her last year of eligibility, and the fams, they're getting their wish. They said one more year. Raven is returning. And coming to South Carolina in next year with Raven is going to be her good friend, Ta'Niya Latson, from Florida State. A huge transfer, Jared. I mean, huge. The nation's the biggest transfer in the portal. The nation's leading scorer from this past season, an All-American coming to South Carolina. They need some shooters. Well, Jared, you got the best one coming to Columbia next season. They played together in high school AAU. They know each other very well. Raven said, let's run it back. Whew. Big get for South Carolina.
I mean, it's early on. I know we don't want to start talking about titles right now.
Yeah.
But
Talk about it.
Ta'Niya Latson averaging 25 points per game. The Gamecocks are already such a rounded team. And then it's like you just grab the biggest superstar you can find and just throw it on that team. They're going to be scary. They're going to be scary. They're going to be real scary next year. She is such a great scorer. She can score at all levels, and that's really what they needed. We said earlier they needed some more shooting. She can do that, but she can attack the basket at an elite level. As far as what this means for South Carolina next year, I can't wait to see that team because they are going to have an overload of offense.
Yeah, it's going to be so much fun to watch. South Carolina, just book your tickets to Phoenix, everybody. Book your tickets to Phoenix because South Carolina, I think, is going to be there. And, of course, at the time of this podcast, who knows who else they're going to get, So we will keep our eyes out for that as well because South Carolina are going to have depth upon depth upon depth upon depth once again. We're going to take another break here on South Carolina Sideline. When we come back, we're going to talk about open locker rooms at the NCAA tournament and how to handle that after a heartbreaking loss, because a lot of people have opinions on, the cameras being in the players' faces so soon after a loss and how hard that is for them. So we're going to take you guys through how all of that works, how we handle that, and just why it works that way. So we're going to take a break, and we'll have that for you when we come back. All right, welcome back to South Carolina Sideline, everybody. Matt Dowell and Jared Parker. And one thing, that I want this podcast to do is to give people behind-the-scenes stories, behind-the-scenes insight into our industry, how it works, funny stories, whatever that is. But I think after the NCAA tournament and after this UConn-South Carolina game and this loss for the Gamecocks, one thing I want to talk about is open locker rooms after a loss for the losing team. And in this case, it was South Carolina. We've been in a part of a lot of winning locker rooms, and that's always fun. But this past weekend, we got the other side of the coin, and that is the losing locker room. And obviously, you guys have seen, the coverage and all, the posting of South Carolina, crying and obviously understandably taking the loss hard. And I know a lot of people at home don't like that us as the media, have cameras in their faces so soon after a loss. But just to take you guys through how that works, and, really just behind the scenes of it all is that the way the NCAA tournament works is we have open locker rooms for 30 minutes after every game, not just this particular championship game. After every single game, we have 30 minutes, and I think they have 10, 15 minutes to cool down, and then we go in for 30 minutes afterwards. In the case of this, it was the same thing. That's just kind of protocol. South Carolina had 10 to 15 minutes to cool down, and then we go to the locker room for 30 minutes. I'm going to be honest, I was a little surprised they didn't wait a little bit longer after this because South Carolina, they were understandably very emotional. But, when they say we go in, and we have to do our jobs and we have to ask hard questions, but also there is a way to go about it. And, Jared, this was your first time doing this with South Carolina in a losing locker room. And when we were walking into the locker room, just as, one of your mentors, I told you, I was like, hey, remember, they're 20-year-old kids. They just got, beat down pretty badly on national television. Their hearts are broken. We got to ask hard questions, but we have to do it in a particular way, in a respectful way. They are human beings at the end of the day. And so, when we go in, yes, we have cameras and mics in their faces, and South Carolina is ready for that. And also, we've been with them for about a month straight. I mean, we've seen each other every day for a month straight. So they do know us. They know who we are. We know each other well, and it's not easy. And we don't like it either, Jared. No. We don't like that we have to talk to them while they're crying, but we also have to get reaction and, their sound bites and their feelings and all of those kinds of things. And I will say this too. I think one thing that our group at South Carolina, local media, not just us, with Watch Fox, but everybody that comes, we are very good at this past weekend, especially, of giving them their space. So you guys didn't get to see this, after the game, but there were moments when it was too much for the players, and we all put our cameras down and we let them walk away and we let them take the time that they needed. It's super, super hard, but we have to ask our questions. And I thought South Carolina handled it beautifully. I thought the players did such a good job. They were mature, they were pros, they were honest with us. So kudos to them. And I know that it's hard, and I know it's awkward, and I know people don't like it, but it's the way it is, and that's just the way it works. And and we didn't make the rule, so that's just the way it works. And I don't know what you want to add to that, but I just kind of thought, people should hear that side of it from us, of like, nobody likes it, and we do go about it in a professional, kind way. At least we do. We try. I can't speak for everybody, but you and I, we did our best.
I mean, it's like you said, it's a hard situation, and I'm glad you were there to kind of guide me into that, because I am less than 2 years into this industry. I've covered losing locker rooms before. I've covered a couple of non-playoff bowl game losses, but a loss in the championship, that locker room, it was different.
Yeah.
And I can't say I've covered anything like that before, because you did just lose, for some of them, what was the biggest game of their life. I mean, in South Carolina's case, I guess that would only be true for only a few of them. But it is challenging because, like you said, they're college kids, but we have to talk to them. We only have 30 minutes. It's not like when we come back to Columbia, we're going to have an open locker room.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, although I know a lot of the fans don't enjoy watching them cry, they are their beloved stars, the fans do want to hear from them. And we post these things like Raven talking about her decision. The fans want to hear about it.
You have to ask it.
We have to ask. And, when Tessa talks about coming back stronger the next year, the fans are happy to see that.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's hard to do it, but they want to know that this team is still in it, that the team's still ready to fight. They want to know about the game, and that's our chance to do it. So it's challenging. I don't like it.
And it was tough. It was tough on Sunday.
Like, just as much as the fans don't like it, we don't like it either, but we have to do it. And ultimately, I think if the goal is truth and the goal is telling these players stories, as we always are attempting to do, this is a part of the journey.
Yeah.
It's, Don says, you have to feel it all. And telling the story of, when they're down after a huge loss, that's part of the story too.
And I know too, like for me, I've been here 9 years. I've known my Malaysia Fulwiley since she was in 7th, 8th grade. I don't like seeing her cry after a national championship. I've known her for a long time. I've covered her for a long time. That's not easy for me. And so I think that's why too, and because we know them so much better than like national media does, which, no shade to national media, just we cover these players for so long. I think we do approach it with a kindness. And I think everyone within our South Carolina circle really handled it really well. And we gave them the space, we gave them the time, and the players, shout out to y'all, because I can't imagine having to do that, on the other side of it. And you guys handled it so well. But it's not easy, but that's just kind of part of the gig. We're going to take one more break here on South Carolina Sideline. When we come back, we'll give you quickly our favorite moments from this season, because it didn't end the way they wanted to, but still a phenomenal season from the Gamecocks. We'll be right back right after this. All right, gonna wrap up our last segment here on South Carolina Sideline. This is a review of the season, and it was a great season, Jared. It was such a great season for South Carolina. Co-regular season champions, SEC tournament champions, making the championship of the NCAA tournament. So much to be proud of for South Carolina. And let's just quickly wrap up this episode with our favorite moments of the season, or moment, whatever which 1, 2, 3. You tell me whatever you want. So, Jared, what was your favorite, the top of the mountain for you this season?
For me, it was that second round game against Indiana. I just love all the storylines going into it. Obviously, you've got Sydney Parrish and Ta'Niya Latson, former teammates at Oregon, going at each other, seeing kind of the love between them before the game, but also Pau was like, sorry, I had to end your career. That was entertaining to watch, but not just that. Seeing the Gamecocks play their final games at the CLA, that also happened that game. And then also just the fact that they played Indiana the year before. They struggled against Indiana. That was their closest test in their undefeated run towards the championship, at least in the NCAA tournament. So just all those things floating around, and Indiana brought the fight. Yeah. They really did. So just the storylines heading into the game, the storylines after the game, that was just a joy to cover because there was so much there.
I was not expecting that. So that was a good one because I didn't think you were going to say that one. But that was a great, and it was also kind of like their first test of the tournament too, which made it even more interesting. I think for me, I'm a lover of the SEC tournament. I told you guys like when we were going to Greenville, I was like, I love the SEC tournament so much. It moves so quickly. It's very like, because it's in Greenville, like South Carolina media dominated, and South Carolina's been the 1 seed for like 20 million years straight. So we just have a good time, and it's kind of chill. Like the vibe is very chill, and South Carolina, of course, winning the whole thing. But I don't know. I think I enjoyed seeing them win because they were kind of still, the coin flip had just happened. There was all these, like the rivalry with Texas was fun. And I thought South Carolina really made a statement in that tournament of beating Vandy, beating Oklahoma, and beating Texas all by double digits back to back to back. I think it was fun to see the team click in that way. And watching a net cutting is always so much fun, so to see the joy and all of that, and to watch South Carolina win another SEC tournament, I think that was my favorite moment of the year. Because it was another great year, and South Carolina, another one's in the books. 35 wins was the end number, 35-4. So South Carolina, another great season, and we're always honored to be a part of it. And shout out to Dawn Staley. She told us afterwards, if you didn't see it on social media, she gave a shout out to the local media because she always does a separate, what we call a gaggle, which is when, or scrum, whatever you want to call it. We call it a gaggle where, we kind of surround her with cameras, and microphones and everything. She always does a separate one with us, separate from the national media. And she told us how much she appreciates our coverage locally because we do the most for this team of anyone around the country. And it was just awesome for her to take the time to acknowledge us, and then we acknowledge them. We don't get the coverage we get if South Carolina is not as accessible and as available as they, let us in. They let us in. They let us in emotionally, X's and O's, all that kind of stuff. So shout out to Dawn, shout out to the players, shout out to everyone involved for making our jobs easier, for making our jobs better, and with all of that, it grows the game.
Yeah.
So shout out to the Gamecocks because great year, and November will be here before we know it.
We'll get in there soon.
Get in there soon. This has been another edition of South Carolina Sideline, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Again, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow, all that fun stuff that you guys do on social media. He's Jared Parker. I'm Matt Dowell. We'll see you back here next week for another episode, another edition of South Carolina Sideline.